I was covering Julian Assange's High Court appeal, and the lead prosecutor, he told the judges, the United States have never broken a diplomatic assurance, ever. These classified documents that I obtained show otherwise. The United States, they've given Assange two assurances, right? They said that he can serve a sentence in Australia, and they've said that he won't be put in oppressive prison conditions. David Mendoza was also given diplomatic assurances. When they were trying to extradite him from Spain to the US in 2009, they also gave Spain diplomatic assurances because the Spanish court imposed 3 conditions on his extradition. They said, if you want to take David Mendoza, number 1, you have to send him back to serve his sentence in Spain. You cannot give him a life sentence because that's illegal in Spain. And you cannot try him for currency structuring because that's not a crime in Spain. The United States Embassy sent this assurance, and I want to read it to you. Pay attention to the language. Look how vague it is. They said that, quote, it does not object to Mendoza making an application to serve his sentence in Spain. That's not the same thing as we will send him back to Spain. This is completely different. For the life sentence, they said that will not seek a sentence of life imprisonment and that it will do everything within its power that Mendoza receives a determinate sentence of incarceration. What is a determinate sentence of incarceration? Is that 5 days, 5 months, 5 centuries? That could mean anything. They could give him 500 years and say, see, that's not a life sentence. It doesn't say life. And the other thing with the currency structuring, they kept it in, right? So they listed all the charges here in this diplomatic note, and they kept the currency structuring in, even though the Spanish court explicitly ruled it out. So Mendoza and his lawyer, I mean, they were immediately alarmed by this. They took it to court, and they said, you got to give us something better than this. What the Spanish court came up with, they made this contract. This is the acta de entrega, or deed of surrender. When Mendoza was extradited, when he was on the tarmac about to get in the plane with the US Marshals, this deed of surrender was signed by Spain, by David Mendoza, and by Kimberly Weiss. And Kimberly Weiss works at the US Embassy in Madrid. So she signed this on behalf of the US government. And what does it say? It says that David Mendoza is surrendered to the US authorities in accordance with what was stipulated by the Spanish National Court. That means when you sign this, you agree to send Mendoza back to Spain to serve his sentence. You agree you cannot give him a life sentence. You agree you can't try him for currency structuring. It's as clear as day. So even if these assurances are vaguely worded, this deed of surrender certainly isn't. This is a very clear, cut and dry contract.
And just to make sure that there's no misunderstanding, the last sentence says, signing those present as proof of agreement.
The US signed it, Spain signed it, and David Mendoza signed it. So he gets to the US, they extradite him in April 2009, and then they give him 14 years. And at sentencing, Mendoza says, you need to send me back to Spain because that's the agreement. And the judge tells him, well, you can't make any claims because you're not a signatory of the extradition treaty between Spain and the US, which is a ridiculous claim because obviously countries, governments sign treaties together, not natural persons. So obviously Mendoza is not a signatory, but that's what they told him. They said, go to jail, and when you're in jail, you can make an application for a treaty transfer. So he goes to jail, he makes the application, 8 months later, they deny him. There's a document from the US Department of Justice denying his application in 2010. Mendoza applied 3 times. 3 times he applied to go back to Spain, and 3 times they denied his application. They violated the diplomatic assurances. They violated the acta de entrega, the contract that they signed with Mendoza and with Spain. So they kept Mendoza for 6 years and 9 months. And after the first denial, Mendoza, he realized the US is not going to give him any justice. He needs to go sue Spain for not enforcing the conditions, for not pressuring the US to send him back. So he goes and he sues Spain in the Supreme Court for violating the conditions of his extradition, for violating his human rights. 2 cases. And he wins them both at the Supreme Court. And the Spanish Supreme Court said to the Spanish government, if you don't get Mendoza back, we will suspend the extradition treaty. And one judge who's very sympathetic to Mendoza anonymously sent him the acta de entrega, the deed of surrender. So now Mendoza had a document proving that he signed a contract with Spain and the US. Because let me tell you something, he knew this paper was there and they wouldn't give it to him. He made a Freedom of Information Act request in the US, and you know what they told him? They said, you can't have it because it's classified and you're not privy to diplomatic communications, even though he read it and signed it. And instead, they gave him a copy of the Acta de Entrega without his signature, so he can't go to court and contest the United States for breach of contract for non-compliance. I mean, this is really some banana republic stuff, right? Can you imagine you sign a contract with someone and then they give you a copy without your signature so you can't make any claims because the other party didn't fulfill their end of the bargain? I mean, this is ridiculous. So that's what they did. But now he had the copy from a Spanish judge. And so now he goes to civil court in the US and he sues the Department of Justice and Obama's Attorney General, Eric Holder. So now, just to recap, Mendoza, he's won 2 Supreme Court cases in Spain. Judges have stopped processing extraditions of Spanish nationals from Spain to the US. The Spanish Supreme Court is practically threatening to suspend the extradition treaty between Spain and the US. He's suing the United States, the Department of Justice, in civil court. Now the United States, the prosecutor, calls up Mendoza's lawyer and says, if you drop the civil suit in the US, you can go back to Spain. So for 6 years and 9 months, they violated the diplomatic assurances. They violated the contract. And it's only because he sued Spain at the Supreme Court and Spain was threatening to suspend the extradition treaty. Only then did they send him back. Only when he sued the US Department of Justice did they send him back. Now you have to ask yourself, in the case of Julian Assange, who's also been given these diplomatic assurances, do you think that he's going to get any sort of luck like that? I want to read you what the assurances to Assange say. Because the US said they won't place him in special administrative measures in these oppressive prison conditions, right? That's not what it says in the assurance. They said that it won't put him in SAMs unless, quote, in the event that after the entry of this assurance, he was to commit any future act that met the test for the imposition of a SAM. So once again, the United States is giving an assurance, which is not really assuring. It has a back door. They're giving themselves the right to not comply with it. They can just get Assange in the US and say, oh, well, you know, he did something that meets the test for an imposition of a SAM, and now we have to put him in special administrative measures. Oops. Same thing with the assurances to Mendoza. It's so vague, it's not even really an assurance. So the other thing that Assange can serve his sentence in Australia. This doesn't work like that. Just because the United States says, okay, you can go do your sentence in Australia, doesn't mean that he can go to Australia. Australia has to say, yes, we accept Assange. We will take him. Has Australia said that? No. How do I know this? Because I've been covering the court case. And I can assure you, they ain't said nothing. So, you know, Australia is a Five Eyes country. The US can just go in back channels, talk to Australia and say, screw this guy, don't take Assange, don't say anything, just be silent. Just stay silent, which is what Australia has been doing. So Assange effectively has no guarantee that he can serve his sentence in Australia because Australia hasn't said it would take him. The assurances that he won't be placed in special administrative measures or jailed in ADX Florence can be overturned, and then the US can say, we never promised. We said that maybe he won't go to ADX, maybe he won't be put in SAMs. And Assange won't be able to contest this because if he goes to court, if the US violates its assurances and Assange goes to court, the US will say, well, did you sign anything with us? And Assange will say, no. You're not a signatory of the extradition treaty? Obviously, Assange will say no. And then they'll say, well, sorry, we can't do anything because you don't have a claim. We didn't sign anything with you. The United Kingdom, they have a claim. And so Assange has to go pressure the United Kingdom, like Mendoza had to go and pressure Spain to pressure the US. You think Assange is going to be able to pressure the UK to pressure the US to comply with the conditions of his extradition? You're dreaming. You are dreaming. Mendoza got lucky. In conclusion, when the lead prosecutor, James Lewis, says,
the US have never broken a diplomatic assurance, that's just untrue. It's just simply untrue.
And I have the proof right here in front of me. The proof is right there in the article. Even if the United States actually made an explicit assurance that we will never put Assange in ADX or in SAMs, and we will do everything in our power to make sure he serves his sentence in Australia, can you trust them? Because they signed a contract that was very explicit with Spain. And let me tell you, they did not keep their word. This was as explicit as it gets. So these assurances are not assurances. They are a way for the United States to cheat the legal system to get Assange into US jurisdiction, and then finito. And David Mendoza, you know what he told me? He said that if the United States did that to him, what are they going to do to Julian Assange? When Julian Assange, I was at his bail hearing in January 6th. Even though he won the extradition case against the United States, the US prosecution said you can't give him bail because he'll just run off again. That was their argument. They said that he has a history of doing this. Like he went to the Ecuadorian embassy. I mean, that's not really bail jumping if you're given political asylum, which is your right under international law. But that was their argument. They said you can't trust him. He won't come back when there are future court dates. When we appeal this decision, he won't be here. And the judge accepted this. She said that, yes, I accept the argument that he's a flight risk and so on. Okay, so if you're going to say that Assange is denied bail because he has a past behavior of bail jumping, well, you can't accept the U.S. assurances because the United States has a history of violating them. I mean, these documents blow the entire prosecution's case out of the water. These documents have not been submitted in court yet. The judges have not seen these documents. They must see these documents because any judge, any sane, rational person who reads this would be convinced that you cannot trust U.S. assurances.